Time now for the big question, where you get to quiz top celebrities, public figures, decision makers and sports people via GBNews. And tonight's guest is a British rapper and Oxford graduate who has become a prominent voice for the anti-woke. In addition to selling 30,000 records throughout his burgeoning career, Zuby drew worldwide attention in 2019 for smashing the women's deadlifting world record while declaring that he identified as a woman. His video, which garnered more than 1 million views and saw him gain a huge following as he appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast, was Zuby's attempt to demonstrate that athletes who were born male should not be competing alongside women. Let's have a little look at this. Since then, Zuby has spoken against COVID restrictions, hit out at the mainstream media for linking pro-freedom protests to the anti-vax movement, and been critical of the Black Lives Matter organisation. Just last week, he tweeted, "BLM is primarily a movement to make white leftists feel good about themselves and position themselves as holier than thou. It's achieved nothing positive and tangible for black people, quite the opposite in my humble opinion." But there's no reason Zuby should be humble because he's a transatlantic star now. And Zuby, it is so brilliant to have you on the show. You're very brave, firstly, Zuby, I have to say, because for someone whose primary role is as a rapper in the music industry, which is obviously very woke, you've taken a big risk with your career by speaking out on all of these issues that are important to you. When you first started to do that, was it a conscious decision? And did you have people around you saying, just shut up, just don't talk about this stuff?
Hey, Dan. Well, firstly, thank you. I mean, I'm a totally independent musician. I've truly built my career and everything I do off the back of my own hard work and support from my fans. So I don't have any manager or record label or company to answer to. In terms of me being a rapper and an artist, I mean, the job of a rapper, the job of a musician, the job of a comedian is to tell the truth and to be willing to say what other people are thinking. So as far as I'm concerned, that's something I've been doing all throughout my career. Very little of it was ever controversial until about 2018, not because my positions particularly changed, but just because the world had shifted so much. So I'm someone who's a truth seeker and a truth speaker. And I think that everybody should, I mean, if we're living in the UK, the USA, any supposedly free country, people should be able to express their opinions, have these conversations. And I'm deeply concerned about how much that is being stifled at the moment.
And we're just looking at your song Real at the moment, Zuby, and you are real. That is what you are. And to me, your voice has been one of the most important over this crisis. But just before we come to that, I just want to go back to the moment that you first reached a massive international audience. And it was when you decided to self-identify as female to prove that if you were to become a weightlifter in your own weight class, you would all of a sudden go on and break the world record, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't particularly difficult. I mean, and that was part of the point. I mean, again, based on what I was just saying a moment ago, this is something that everybody knows is absurd. We've known forever that males and females are different, not just across the human species, but across all animal species. We know that men are built differently. We're bigger, we're stronger, we're faster. This is why in professional sports, you have male competitions and you have female competitions, because if you just took the biggest and the fastest and the strongest, then women would not be able to compete. So this notion that somebody can simply say that they are whatever gender they want to be and that they should then be able to compete in whatever sport they want to against natural competitors in that division is absurd. And everybody knows that it's absurd. Most people don't want to say it because they don't want to be labeled. They don't want to be called names. They don't want to be considered hurtful or whatever it is. But I think we need to, there's been a war on reality itself over the past several years. And so people need to be able to recognize reality. You can be kind, you can be compassionate, you can treat people with respect and dignity without warping reality. And it's the warping of reality and the repercussions of that that I'm deeply concerned about.
No, you're completely right. And I love it when you say that you haven't changed, just the world around you got madder and madder and madder, because that's exactly how I feel. I feel that all of my views are anchored in common sense and reality. And actually, you have a lot of people, especially in the entertainment industry, that propagate loads of this stuff. They know deep down that what they're saying is bonkers or weird, but they feel they have to because of the orthodoxy, the woke orthodoxy, and it disappoints me on a daily basis. But I completely agree with the point that you're making. And of course, that brings us to COVID and lockdowns, because there's another orthodoxy with that movement. And you have been very outspoken on masks, on vaccination of children, and on lockdowns themselves. And again, it's seen you often criticised for putting public health at risk. How do you respond when people say that?
Sure. So I would say that, again, I have not moved. If we go back to January 2020, everybody was pro-lockdown. Everybody was anti-mask mandate. Everybody was anti-vaccine mandate. Everyone was opposed, whether they consider themselves conservative, liberal, neither. Everybody was agreed that, it's not that long ago where people were debating if in European countries, if face coverings should be banned in public, right? There were all the conversations about the burqa ban. And as someone who grew up in the Middle East, who grew up in Saudi Arabia, there's something ironic and actually quite amusing about this notion that face coverings are now mandated in supposedly free countries and cities. So again, I've simply maintained my position. I'm not against masks themselves. I'm not against vaccines themselves. I'm against mandate. I'm against the use of the state or government force to force these things upon free people. We're not living in North Korea. We're not living in China. If you live in the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, USA, Western Europe, these are supposed to be free countries where you recognize adults as adults, and adults are able to make their own decisions. In a particular circumstance like this, we know, and we've known for a very long time, that this particular virus affects people differently based on their age, based on their comorbidities, based on their general health, lots of different factors. And everyone has a different risk analysis and a different risk profile. And the government doesn't care about you more than you care about yourself. The government doesn't care about your family or your friends more than you care about them. And there's suddenly been this absurd notion and this, all of a sudden, it's like other people are responsible for your own health. Now, we've never thought about that before. If you got sick in the past, nobody would think to blame that on another individual. Just living life, everything has risk in it. None of us get out of this world alive. People were dying and getting sick prior to 2020. And we've always had diseases. We've always had vaccines. None of this stuff is new. What is new is the level of hype, and I would say propaganda, that has surrounded this particular virus, which has resulted in this global mass psychosis where a lot of people now are literally living by rules they previously never would have advocated for or thought believable in their own countries. And in some cases are even advocating against very, very anti-liberty, anti-freedom, anti-democratic policies, which is what it is. So I don't even call myself anti-lockdown or anti-that. I'm simply pro-liberty. I'm pro-freedom. I simply am advocating for what everyone claimed they used to believe a year and a half ago.
Absolutely. You make a very good point on masks, by the way. If these masks really worked in any way, why don't we hear people talking more about what sort of masks we should be wearing, and to make sure that we wear the surgical masks and that we treat them carefully? But instead, people just pull these cloth masks out of their pocket that have probably been there for about 5 days. They're nothing more than a virtue signalling tool.
They're a tool to avoid confrontation. That's what it is. I mean, I've been to 6 countries over the past 18 months. I'm in the USA right now. I'm in Hawaii. I've also been to Texas, Florida, New York, Maine, Maryland, lots of different places. I'm heading to California later this week. And the difference here between, say, the red states and the blue states is extraordinary. People are living in completely different realities. If you go to most places in Texas or Florida, it's like nothing is going on. You wouldn't know there's any virus going around. People aren't living in fear. Everything's normal. Thousands and thousands of people gathering, no masks, etc. All of a sudden, you go to New York, or you go to even here in Hawaii, and people are living in a whole different reality. despite the data. And that's really bizarre. That's happening within countries, even in all around the world, actually. I was going to say within Europe, but all around the world. And people are not running off of data and common sense, and people are not willing to have these conversations. The level of demonization that's been going on for everybody who is simply pro-liberty, pro-freedom, trying to label them as anti-vaxxers or trying to say that they don't care about public health or they're trying to get people killed, it's all absurd. It's all emotion. It's all programming. And I stand against that. Even if someone disagrees with my opinions, I'm like, cool, let's have a conversation. Let's talk. I don't expect absolutely everybody to agree with me. And people keep saying, trust the experts, follow the science, but that's not what people are doing. People are just running off of whatever they've been told to believe. They're not adjusting their positions when new information comes out. And there have just been so many layers of absurdity and hypocrisy and truly anti-scientific nonsense going on. If you want a simple example, how come everywhere in the world now, people enter a restaurant and they put on a mask and then they sit down 30 seconds later and they take it off and they eat and they're laughing and they're drinking and then they go out and they put it back on. I mean, it's absurd. And this is happening in every country, almost in every city. It's truly ridiculous.
It's COVID theatre. Whereas you, as a fitness expert and someone who's written a book about health, actually, you raise a very good point. You say, why for the past 18 months are people not talking about losing weight, eating better, exercising? You say someone will weigh 300 pounds plus, wear a mask, take a shot, and they think it's all good. The fact that governments forcibly closed gyms in many places, even outdoor gyms, but kept fast food joints open, told you everything you need to know. So you think there's been a lot of incorrect priorities over the past 18 months when it comes to what public health messaging should be out there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit which people have not been talking about. I mean, something as simple as vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D is a very, very cheap supplement. I mean, you can get it just by going outside, or you can take a simple tablet. We know about vitamin D. We know about zinc.
If you live in the UK, you probably need a tablet, right? If you're in Hawaii, you're fine. But
yeah, and in fact, if you have darker skin, you probably need more of it as well. And that's something that wasn't discussed, especially last year. They talked about some racial disparities in terms of who was suffering with the virus, but they never brought that up. And there are so many holes in the narrative. I mean, I've seen something like 78% of people who are hospitalized, I think in the USA, were overweight or obese. That's a massive comorbidity. People have now had 18 months. So this has been a time, and I salute everybody who has taken a moment and taken months over this time to really improve their health and think more holistically.
Well, I'm trying.
This isn't the only...
I'm trying.
Keep working at it, Dan. Keep working at it, man.
I've got a long way to go.
There are a lot of things out there that can harm and that can kill people.
Yeah,
we've known for many years.
And we have to be balanced about it. Look, I want to talk about the Black Lives Matter organisation as well, because, there's been this ongoing debate in the UK, especially in regards to taking the knee. You say that BLM is actually a movement to make white leftists feel good about themselves and position themselves as holier than thou. As a black man, you say it's achieved nothing tangible for someone like you or for black people on the whole. What do you mean by that?
If someone disagrees with that, I would love for someone to tell me what tangible things it has achieved. As far as I can see, over the years, it's resulted in more deaths of black people. If we're looking in the USA, if you remember just back to last summer, the BLM protests were sparked by the death of George Floyd, and by one black man being killed. Those riots actually led to over a dozen black people being killed, let alone the number of people generally harmed, the number of businesses lost and trashed. And people don't want to talk about that. It's not convenient. So the death of one black man led to the death of, another 15 or so directly. And then the abolish and defund the police movement, particularly in inner cities. What happened last year? Murder rate went up in virtually every large US city. And if you're going to talk about Black Lives Mattering, then I'm all for that. I agree with that. I don't need someone on TV or some political organization to tell me that my life and my family lives and the lives of over 1 billion people around this world matter. Everybody's life matters. We know that. And so I would love for there to be a movement, perhaps called that, or something else, and actually really, okay, let's look at the top 10 causes. Let's look at the top 5 things that are actually killing people in this certain demographic or in this certain community, and let's address those. And in the top 10 is not police. This is not saying that there aren't police brutality issues that exist in some parts of the USA and around the world. Absolutely. In which case, I think there should probably be a specific different movement for that, which is called that, I don't know, end police brutality or something like that. But one of my biggest criticisms is because this organization and movement is not really addressing any of the elephants in the room. And in terms of what they're trying to do, I'm not seeing any tangible differences being made. I'm seeing people using this hashtag and this statement and the flags to make themselves look like an anti-racist or a good person, or to show that they are holier than thou. But when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, I'm not seeing anything tangible. And I care much more about doing good than looking good. I think we live in a society, and perhaps this is not new, where people want to look good and people want to feel good and they want to signal to other people. But it's like, what are you really doing? What is being achieved? What are the positive outcomes of this? Now, if there have been some, I'm totally open to hear that. I would love to hear some good things. Maybe there's some things that have happened in certain cities or chapters that I'm not aware of. But from what I've seen, it's actually increased the tension. It's raised the temperature. It's forced more people to see along racial lines, which to me is not a good thing. And all of that doesn't help. Kneeling doesn't do anything, doesn't help anything. It's a signal, but it falls very flat with me personally.
Beautifully put, Zuby. Look, I want to get to our viewer questions now because there's so many of them pouring in. Charlie, via email, asks, what would it take for you to make a political stand officially? And actually, Luffy via Twitter says, can you please become PM one day? So would you ever, Zuby, consider officially running for office?
Possibly in the future. Right now, I think there's better ways for me to use my time, talents, energy, and abilities, but I'm still a young man. Lord willing, I've got a lot of time on this earth left, so I won't discount anything totally.
Neil, via email, asks, do you accept that you will have no choice but to get vaccinated or face denial of entry to the US in the future? Because, of course, they have announced today, Zuby, Biden's announced today that Brits will be able to enter from November, but they will have to have had the vaccine.
Interesting. Why don't we talk about natural immunity? Why is that overlooked? Why is it overlooked that hundreds of millions of people around the world, including myself, have already had COVID, recovered from it, and got the antibodies and the T cells? Exactly. I mean, the fact that this is another huge elephant in the room, another giant glaring red flag that should make everybody just go, wait, hang on. That doesn't make sense. Is this about health? Is this about science? There have been many studies now coming out, and we've known for many years that natural immunity tends to be better than vaccine-induced immunity.
Well, certainly in terms of transmission. Certainly in terms of transmission. You're far less likely to pass COVID on if you've had if you've got natural immunity.
Yeah, and many, literally hundreds of millions of people have that at this stage. We're 18 months into this situation. So that's something, maybe my voice is not big enough to raise that one up to the world and to whoever needs to go into all that. But yeah, that's bizarre to me. And in terms of that, that's news to me as well. So
certainly not to Joe Biden, given I wish he's going to force his staff at the White House to be vaccinated, or he's not going to let them work for him. So,
he's turning out to be everything that people claim that Trump was.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? Finn, via Twitter, asks, how do you feel about the use of racial and homophobic slurs in rap music?
I'm not a fan, which is why I've never used them ever in my entire career. I don't use them in the real world. I don't use them in my music. However, I'm a freedom of speech advocate. I don't think those are words that add anything positive to the world, in all honesty. But I'm not the speech police. I'm not out here trying to tell people what words they can and can't say. As we know, that's a really slippery slope. So I would encourage my fellow artists to avoid that. But ultimately, rappers are going to say what rappers are going to say.
Absolutely. And Zuby, you are going to say so much important stuff. You're one of the most powerful voices I think we have now, especially on freedom of speech and COVID. So where can we hear from you? Because you've got a podcast now, right, too?
I do, yeah. It's called Real Talk with Zuby. So you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at Zuby Music. That's ZUBY Music on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And my new album, Word of Zuby, is also out now on all major platforms. So if you want to support, you can check that out.